thank you for like coming again.
Very welcome, mate. It's
We've
always a
done an
pleasure.
interview before, but yeah, my first question I wanted to ask is, why did you want to get into film? And was partly two questions: why you wanted to get into film, and how did you get into the film industry?
So I've basically, like, I come from a single parent family and I'm an only child, and so I spent loads and loads of time as a young kid just watching movies. Like, the kids these days don't understand, right? Like, when I was a kid there was 4 channels on TV, and like nobody even had a VCR player in their home, right? It was like whatever movies were on TV is the movies that you watch, right? It's not like Netflix where you can pick and choose. So you get forced into watching, like, or not forced, but you end up watching things that are outside of your comfort zone, and so you kind of learn a lot about different types of film. And my mum was working a lot, and so the TV was like a bit of a babysitter, so I would be watching movies. And then when we eventually did get a video player, there was movies on all the time, and so I would take movies and then I would watch them back all the time, and I just loved watching them. And because my mum wasn't around a lot of the time, I was just engaged with that. Like, if I couldn't go out and play or whatever, I would just be watching movies, and I was just transported into it. I just love sitting and watching a movie for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and it's just something that's never left me. I don't get the time now to sit and watch as many movies as I'd like, and I actually think that with things like Netflix and Amazon where you can change it, I think it's quite damaging, actually, because you're only ever watching stuff that you enjoy. And I think to be a good filmmaker, you need to be able to watch a whole range of different things. And I was certainly forced into watching things that I wouldn't necessarily, I might not ever want to watch again, but you're learning different techniques and styles and storytelling techniques and everything all the time. And so, yeah, I think when I realised I wanted to be a filmmaker, I saw the horror movie The Shining when I was about 6 or 7 years old, right? Which is not good, and that's where my love of horror come from. But I think I sat and watched that and was kind of a bit mesmerised. And then when the credits started coming up at the end, I was looking at it and thinking, oh man, like, so many people work on a movie. And being interested in finding out what, like, I remember like seeing casting assistant and being like, I don't know what that does. And then so going away and researching the different jobs and everything, and just thinking, well, look, if this many people work in a movie, all of these little jobs sound interesting, from the kind of one line guide that you get to what the jobs are. And so I thought, well, yeah, like, that's what I want to do. I want to work in film. Didn't know exactly what at the time. And then, as I kind of got older and watched more and learned more about the film industry, kind of decided that I actually, my passion was to make films myself. And obviously it's a really difficult thing to be able to go and just make a film, because as I say, when you watch the credits, it's not one person making a film. It's, on a big budget movie, it's thousands of people these days. And so I managed to find a way into the industry where I was one of those small jobs, and kind of wanted to learn as many of the jobs as possible, in order that, with the kind of crazy idea that one day I might be able to make my own films if I know enough about all the different departments. And it's kind of paid off a little bit. So I started working post-production. So I was an assistant to a post-production supervisor, and so learned all of the kind of, I learned it backwards, right? I learned all the post-production stuff first, and then after doing that for, I think, like 3.5, 4 years or something, I realised that actually what I wanted to do was go and be on set and experience that. And so I went and did that for, 3 years or something. And then kind of realised, actually, yeah, like, I've enjoyed this, but it's also sort of disorganised chaos. And so I figured, well, let's go and work in the production office to work out how the organisation aspect of it works. And then so I did a few jobs as like a production secretary, and then moved up to a production coordinator and kind of assisting people, line producers and what have you, and then ended up being a production manager on a couple of feature films, and learned that bit, and then kind of realised, actually, again, now I'm away from the creative side of it again, which is kind of a really difficult place to pinpoint, and the creativity of the whole film industry is the the whole reason I wanted to get into it. And so I'd always enjoyed helping out, just for half a day here and there in the art department. And I think they are the most creative people on set. Like, they get to do more, the pressure's more, but they get to have a kind of a say in the whole environment of everything that you're seeing on screen. And so ended up working as a head of department greensman, so I design natural scenery and landscapes for film and TV, and that suits me just fine. Like, I get a good level of creativity, and as a head of department I get to do the organisational stuff, and because I've got experience on set and in post-production as well, I think I can bring that to the job, and I can help people creatively to achieve things that they might not necessarily have thought about if they've only ever come through one channel in the film industry. About 15 years ago, kind of realised that I'd been working in film for like 10 years or whatever and hadn't made my own film, and so got together with one of my friends and we decided to do a short film, and we really enjoyed it, and we made some good friends, and then we went and did another one and we made more friends, and we've ended up building up this kind of network of people who are all kind of in the same boat as us, who all work in the film industry but don't necessarily get to make films, whereas when they come to us, like, we treat it like a real team, and everybody gets to have a say, and so we're kind of making films like a bit like a community, and so we've done 3 feature films and I think 12 or 13 short films now, and we do it when we've got the time and energy, which ends up being maybe once a year or something. Because it does take a long time. I think the features that we did, the first one was like 15 consecutive weekends, and then we narrowed it down with Nefarious and we were like 12 weekends. By the time we did the last one, I think it was a bit weird because of COVID, so we could only do bits and pieces here and there, but it ended up, I think it was like 21 shooting days over the course of about 4 months or something. But we've kind of found our way with it and still learning all the time, and so just constantly evolving with it. So long-winded answer, but
it's fine. Your first feature film, Dodged. How did that come about?
So we saw an advert from a production company, and they were looking for short films that were no more than I think 4 minutes long, and they were putting together a TV show for BBC Three, and it was called The Fear. And so basically it was a bit like an X Factor for horror films. So you would make a 4-minute film, and then they sent them in, and then they would judge them, and then they picked the best 20 or 25, and they screened them at a cinema in London with an audience, and then the audience had to vote out of 10 for their favourites. And we ended up tied joint 4th in the competition for that, and we were I think we were surprised by the success of it, but the prize for the winner of the competition was I think like 10 grand or 20 grand to make a feature. And so we decided, well, look, if this professional production company think you can make a feature for 10 or 20,000, and we've had a good response to this short film, let's go and try and make it as a feature film, and do it with within a £20,000 budget. And so I think we raised like £14,000 on crowdfunding, and then the rest of it we put in between the kind of 4 producers, and we called in lots of favours and helpers and everything else, and we did that. And we didn't know what to expect, and we submitted it to some film festivals, and we started picking up awards and screenings, and we were like, okay, people are actually really quite enjoying this. And I think part of that is because it was so low budget, so they, like anything, if you go in with low expectations, then you're always going to be impressed. And I think they saw it and thought that it's pretty ambitious in its scope. Like there's like 14 key characters in it, and we had a scene where we had like 50 odd extras, and it's quite ambitious. And off the back of that, we got offered a distribution deal for the UK and Ireland and America. and they you know, they distributed the movie, and it's still like on DVD and HMV and things like that. And so I take my kids in there, and I'm like, see if you can find Daddy's film, you know, and they like put it to the front of the shelf and whatever. So so it was kind of, everything always is a surprise to us, you know, kind of how well it gets received, and we're always trying to do things a little bit differently. So like I never want to make the same type of movie again and again. So I like horror movies, but I don't want to do just zombie movies or just, you know, vampire movies or whatever. So we did, the first one was a folk horror, which is kind of a niche kind of subgenre. And then the second one we did is like a home invasion, sort of social realism type film. And then the last one was kind of a horror comedy, like with a kind of a slasher with a possessed mask. And so just kind of, you know, trying different things all the time and seeing what works.
Yeah. In 2019, you raised money for I think this is your second feature film.
Yeah.
Hard to pronounce this one.
Nefarious. Yeah,
Nefarious. So again, how did that come about? Because again, that was a Kickstarter. So
we did a Kickstarter for the very first short film we did, because we just didn't know kind of how to raise money outside of, you know, going to production companies and spending years in development. And then it, you know, for me, filmmaking is it's an art form, and it's an expression piece by the writer and the director and the team involved in making it. And I think if you're taking money from a production company, then there's certain pressures on you to deliver things in a certain way that are commercial, that are for an audience, that are for this, for that. And for me, that's not what artwork's about. You know, you don't paint a picture and then have somebody come in a gallery and go, I don't really like the sun being there. Can you move the sun to the left? It's not kind of, it's the opposite of kind of how I think art should be. It should be made by an artist, and then you can put it out there, and the audience get to decide what they think of it. And so we've done these Kickstarters, and we did Dogged as well, and that did well. And I think each time you do it, you're building up a bit more of a fan base. So each time you can ask for a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, until you get to a point where we're like with our last short film, I think we were asking for £2,000 and we raised £3,500. So you start to get this fan base in there of people who are identifying with not just the movies that you're making, but the whole idea and reason why you're doing them. Because, you know, we're very clear, like, we don't pay anybody a penny. Like, nobody gets paid in the cast and crew when they do it. And they're all there. That, you know, that proves to the audience, actually, these people are doing it because they love it. And because they've got some sort of artistic, you know, bent to kind of get this story across. So I think people are much more prepared to give you money on crowdfunding if they think that you're doing it for the right reasons, and that you've got a message and that you've got a story to tell. So, yeah.
Because like my next question, I was just going to ask you, like, why do you think people are scared to go the Kickstarter route? Like, why do you reckon?
As filmmakers, I think look, like anything, right? That as an artist, it's really difficult to put yourself out there or put your work out there and be open to criticism. You have to have quite a thick skin, and if you read through some of the reviews on Letterboxd and IMDb or whatever of my films, at first it kind of really got to me, and that can really affect you as an artist, because you're thinking, well, am I making shit? You know, just because one person says it's shit. And the truth is you're not, because as long as you're doing something and you've got a motive for doing it, actually at the end of the day, you know, actually I don't want everybody to like my work. That's not what art's about. You don't make it for everybody to like it. You make it to connect with people that it connects with, and affecting stories don't always connect with people because they're from different backgrounds. They're from this, they're from that. So with Nefarious, you know, like, it's about this group of people who are from, like, you know, a really difficult background, and they're living in social housing and whatever, and they see an opportunity to get rich quick, even though it's kind of not necessarily a legit way of doing it, and they go for it. Now, if you're from a rich background and you've been to a public school, you're not going to identify with that. You're not going to understand, you're just going to say, oh, well, they wouldn't do that. But you've never been in that situation, so you don't know. And So I'm always quite clear, like, well, I make movies that I want to watch myself and with characters that I would identify with, and I think that's an important part of filmmaking. So yeah, it's don't try and please all of the people all of the time, as they say.
Do you think do you think people should just go for it, like when it comes to a Kickstarter or campaign, like do you think there's the right time to do it, or do you think just go for it even you don't have the experience or anything?
I think the difficult thing is in actually the platforms, the Kickstarters and the Indiegogos and Seed and Spark and all these, the way that they're set up, the interface for them, you have to put a lot of research and planning and kind of appropriate messages in the campaigns for people so that they can pick out what they're identifying with. So I think, like you can make a video or whatever, but if your video is too long or your video is too boring, then it puts people off. And, you have to be able to say, you have to be accountable, right? So you have to say, look, if I'm asking for £10,000, £2,000 of it's going to go on this, £500 is going to go on this. And I think all the way through the campaign and afterwards as well, as long as you deliver on your promises, then I think you've got no problem with it. I think it is difficult as a filmmaker if you're really passionate about an idea and you say, look, I'm going to do it, and you go out and do it and it doesn't raise the money that you need it to, that can be really disheartening. But it doesn't mean that your idea is not valid or your project's not worthwhile doing. It just means that you haven't necessarily connected with the audience for that film. And so, one of the key mistakes that I see on these platforms all the time is filmmakers, they set up a page and they just expect it to grow organically. It just doesn't work like that, because with algorithms and things on social media these days, everything gets lost unless you're pushing it all the time. So, if you're doing a horror movie, you need to post about that 10, 15 times a day on Instagram, same on Twitter, same on Facebook, anywhere you can. And it's always, researching in advance, what hashtags do I need to use? How am I going to get this visible in front of the eyes of people who are actually going to, back it? And, even with horror, where there's like a built-in audience, right? It's tough to raise £20,000 or £25,000. So you just have to find who you think your audience is and really target it at them. And I think there's a bit of a kind of a misunderstanding as well. So like with most crowdfunding campaigns for film particularly, I think there's a real statistic around it, but I think it's about 40% of your backers are from amongst your friends and family. Always people that you know. They're the people you can rely on. Finding the other 60% or whatever, that's the difficult bit, because you've got to tap into an audience. And that's why the first ones are most difficult, because once you've found a bit of an audience, as long as you're delivering on all your promises and your rewards, then, they will come back next time, maybe 20% of them, then you've only got to find another 40% for the second film. So it's super hard. It's actually much harder work than making a film, running the crowdfunding campaign. But it's a means to an end. It's like anything else, right? If you break your back shoveling sand all day, it might seem awful, but at the end of the day, you've cleared the sand off your driveway or whatever. It's the hard part and the dirty part, but it's not any harder or dirtier than going around production companies and begging for a budget.
So I always wanted to ask, because one thing I've noticed about you've always had a good tribe. You've always had good people around you. How did you find like a good tribe, and what advice would you give to filmmakers who like need a tribe? Yeah,
I think, look, it's I think a good thing about me, but also one of my faults, is that I'm really honest, and I bare my soul to everybody that I'll talk to. I'm not, and in the film industry, that's not really the done thing, right? There's a lot of showboatiness and kind of people being very guarded and never wanting to admit their weaknesses and all of this. And again, that's fine for an industry, but for me, it's not an industry, it's an art form. And so if you can find kindred spirits around you who, believe in that and all want to work towards the same goal, you know, it's, you know, don't get me wrong, like my guys, we're all, you know, we're very tight, but we have our ups and downs at moments as well. But at the end of the day, we're all friends and we know that we're all working towards the same thing. So if there's ever any cross words, you put it to one side. It's like if you're playing in a football team, right? You might shout at your teammates on the pitch. As soon as the final whistle goes, it's all forgotten.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same sort of pressure, right? You're out there and, you know, I say, if you're honest with people and, you know, I think it's like a thing I posted on Instagram that I saw the other day, right? And it's so true, right? It's like everybody's got their part to play, right? The sky would be really boring at night if there was just one star in it. Everybody's a star in it, and everybody has to add towards it. It's and it's about treating people with that respect and making sure that they all treat each other with that respect as well.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something. So, Denzel Washington said, "Filmmaking is easy. It's not hard." Ice Cube said, "Gatekeepers are not hard to go past. It's just like climbing a fence."
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Is a luxury. It's an opportunity, and most importantly, it's a gift. Obviously, everybody here is talented enough to do that, but don't get it twisted. It's just a movie. It ain't that big a deal.
You know, I think there's people that try to make sure you stay in your lane. And if you look like you're getting out of your lane, you know, sometimes they'll watch you, sometimes they'll put guardrails up, and sometimes they'll actually put a gate up and make sure you go no further. But we all got them, and we all got to figure out who they are. We don't have to let them know we know who they are. You know, I used to hop fences when I was young all the time. A fence or a gate never stopped me from going where I wanted to go. So.
When you first started in the entertainment industry doing films, and now you see them now, which one is the most difficult?
None of them. They all easy. You just got to go at them. You know, you can't try to nice guy all the time. You know, all of them fold like a chair, and this one will too.
In some respects, yeah, absolutely. I think probably Denzel Washington's probably talking about if you've got money behind you, and that's the most difficult part of it. Getting the money is the hard part, but making the film is easy as long as you've got the right people around you. Absolutely. And I think the gatekeepers thing is a tricky one, because as much as I agree with it, look, there's certain ways to go around all of these things, but there are also certain hoops you have to jump through with some elements of it. You'll never get it all your own way. So we've had it before, you know, with distributors. They've asked to change the titles of films. They've asked to change the posters of films. They've asked to cut this. They've asked to add that. They've asked to reshoot this. At the end of the day, if you want the best exposure for your project, then there are always going to be hoops you want to jump through, because you, as much as you want to and as much as you try, you can't do every aspect of it. I would love to have my own distribution company and distribute my own films and just put movies out there into the world. It doesn't quite work like that in that sense. You can go out and you can make a film and you can deliver a film to a distributor, but all of the big distributors are always going to want their say in something. So there's the thing in the film industry, they talk about the hairy arm, right? Have you come across this? Right. So if you're making a movie for a studio, it doesn't matter what you give them. The studio wants some sort of say in the final product. So the tip is always leave a shot of a hairy arm in the film, because then they'll pick up on it and they'll go, there's a shot of a hairy arm you need to cut out. It makes them feel like they're special when they're having a say in it, but you knew all along that hairy arm's not going to make it into the final cut.
That's true. Why do you think filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers today are like scared to believe in themselves and they're scared of failure? Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it's to do with social media and how easy it is to criticize people facelessly. The amount of abuse that you get online as a filmmaker, whether you're putting something on YouTube or whether it's being released in a cinema or whatever it is, everybody can hide behind their keyboard and go, this is shit and this is that and the other. And as I say, like as a filmmaker, right, it can be really hard to take. What you have to remember as a filmmaker is that, you know, everybody's got a valid opinion, but you don't want to know everybody's valid opinion, and you certainly don't have to listen to everybody's valid or invalid opinion. That if somebody who works for Empire magazine is reviewing your movie and they criticize it, fine, like you can take that to heart. If it's somebody called, I don't know, John Paul 2483 or whatever on social media, their opinion doesn't matter a shit to anybody. You know, it's just them sitting in their bedroom typing away where they know they're not ever going to get found out. And so that makes it really hard for filmmakers, because I think you know there's a level of unfounded criticism that comes at you which could really put you off, and you know it has a couple of times. And I think what we've tried to do, certainly with our last film, is kind of really poke fun at that. So when we released Dogged, we didn't even release the trailer went out on BrickFlix or something like that, like a big website, and there's a kind of a forced perspective shot in the trailer where there's people like in a tea room, and one of the tables at the front looks small because of the forced perspective, and the first comment on the YouTube was, "What's with the stupid small tables?" And so we kind of it took us a while to figure out what they were talking about, and then we realised, and we're like, okay, that's a really nitpicky kind of thing to pick up on in a trailer. And so at the beginning of our last movie, there's a trailer, a fake trailer for a movie called Small Tables, which uses footage from Dogged, and the story in the second one is about this kind of film director who's failed at being a film director and ends up working in porn. And he has a big poster in his office for his one big hit, which is called Small Tables. So, you know, we're just like kind of trying to poke fun at it and just point out how utterly ridiculous it is that people pick up on stuff like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, I just wanted to also ask you this last one. Who are your best 3 directors and why?
I think that is a really difficult question. I think I've been asked this one before. I think that for different reasons, I think I really love Stanley Kubrick's stuff because of the kind of intricacy of the psychology of the characters. I really love the visuals of David Fincher. I think his movies kind of look really dark and grimy and always feel like they're in a certain period of time, like they're a snapshot of a period of time. And I think like for pure entertainment value, Steven Spielberg, you know, the big crowd pleasing movies, but you know, there's so many great directors and storytellers out there, and the thing that fascinates me about directors is that regardless of what the movies are or how different their movies seem, a lot of the time they're telling the same story over and over again, and I turn that kind of light on myself to work out, am I doing the same thing? And like, yeah, okay, I am. And I think it kind of boils down to what your kind of core emotions are as a director. And you know, I know with my film, like all my films, I'm always telling the story of somebody who feels like an outsider who is being manipulated by the outside world against their will, but also without their understanding a lot of the time. And you know, somebody like Denis Villeneuve, his movies to me always appear like they're about somebody who, you know, the protagonist who feels like they're destined for something great and then realizes that they're not at all. They're just a kind of a small cog in a big machine. And you know, I think there's a lot to be said for it, no matter how different the stories are. But yeah, I think that's what it boils down to as a director, finding what your kind of singular story that you're telling over and over again is, and then realizing how you can rework that and how you can retell it in different ways to kind of disguise it from the audience almost.